No one noticed when Destiny walked into the church wearing high heels and an old perfume. The white flowers tried to hide the scent of broken promises, and the piano played as if it knew it was about to be interrupted. Damon Wells thought he was starting over, until the past stepped through the door under the name Serena Vorse, and when his eyes met hers, time forgot its own purpose. The church was covered in white roses, their sweet scent mixing with incense and the promise of a new beginning. Damon adjusted his collar, trying to hide the tremor in his hands. He hoped that day would erase everything that came before, but the past never asks for permission to return. The piano echoed softly, almost shyly, as the guests settled into their seats. The low murmur of voices whispered blessings and quiet curiosity, as if everyone sensed something they couldn't yet name. Damon looked up at the altar, where light streamed through the stained glass windows. That light seemed to either bless him or judge him. Claire Evans was about to walk in. Outside, the white car waited while her hands trembled around the bouquet. There was love, maybe, but also a shadow she couldn't define. Each step toward the altar would be a promise of peace. Yet something deep inside her whispered that peace always comes with a price. Inside the church, Damon took a deep breath. A shiver ran through him like a distant memory. His heart sped up for no clear reason. It was as if an echo from long ago was calling him, from a time when he still believed in redemption. But time has its own way of collecting what it's owed. The priest straightened his papers, ready to begin the ceremony. The voices faded into complete silence. And then it came, a sound, sharp and deliberate. Heels. The click of high heels echoing down the aisle. A sound that didn't belong to that wedding, but to the past Damon had tried so hard to bury. The crowd turned. The sound stopped, and the door slowly began to open. The wind entered first, scattering petals across the polished floor. Then the shadow took shape, a dark dress, cold eyes, a steady posture. Serena Vorse, the name Damon had sworn never to speak again. The air seemed to vanish. The priest froze. Claire hesitated at the entrance, and Damon took a step forward, unable to believe what he was seeing. Serena, alive, here, and with the same look that had always destroyed him, the one where love and danger blended until they became indistinguishable. She walked with the calm of someone who doesn't fear chaos. Every step sounded like a verdict. The flowers seemed to wilt beneath her perfume. The guards by the door exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to stop her or bow down. The former queen of the underworld was back, and the church suddenly felt too small to hold her. Damon tried to speak, but no words came out. It was as if time itself had stopped. Serena looked at him, and a faint smile, almost invisible, crossed her lips. There was no joy in it, only recognition. And an old pain, still alive, like a wound that never truly healed. The whisper among the guests grew restless. No one knew whether it was the beginning of a scandal or a divine confession about to unfold. Claire looked at Damon, searching for an explanation, but he only saw Serena, as if the whole world had vanished, leaving just the two of them, and everything they'd once lost. Serena walked down the central aisle, each step dragging the ghosts of their past behind her. Claire's veil trembled, Damon's breath faltered. The church bells rang out of sync, as if even sacred time refused to bless that moment. The priest tried to intervene, but one look from Serena was enough to silence him. There was authority in her eyes, a mix of royalty and curse. She stopped a few steps away from the altar, standing face to face with Damon. Silence fell. Even the air seemed afraid to move. It was the kind of silence that comes right before a storm. He can't say yes. The words came out cold and deliberate, slicing through the air like a blade. Their echo bounced off the walls, cutting through every soul in the room. Claire stepped back, her bouquet fell, and Damon looked as if he'd just awakened from a dream he never wanted to end. Serena kept her gaze locked on him. Not before God. Not while the past is still alive. The murmur turned into chaos. Guests began to stand, some recording, others praying. The perfect wedding dissolved like smoke, and fate made its presence known, merciless and uninvited. Damon took a step forward, trying to understand what he was seeing. Serena! The name came out like a whisper of pain. He reached out a hand, but she didn't move. Her eyes said everything. You buried me alive, and now I've come to claim what's mine. A gust of wind swept through the church, blowing out a few candles. The altar shook under the distant sound of the bells. Damon realized that faith and crime were about to meet under the same roof. The sacred and the profane, face to face, and he stood right in the middle of it. Claire tried to approach, but one of Serena's guards blocked her path. She looked lost, her eyes full of fear and confusion. Serena didn't even glance at her. To her, Claire was nothing more than a detail, a temporary distraction in a story that began long before any vow at the altar. The priest gathered his scriptures, as if he understood there's no blessing for hearts at war. The stained glass light fell across Serena's face, painting it in red and gold. An angel and a condemned soul, both at once, the kind of woman love can never fully redeem. Damon realized he couldn't breathe. The weight of everything he'd tried to forget pressed down on him. The broken promises, the spilled blood, her absence. It all returned in a single look. And he knew, no matter how far he tried to run, Serena would always find him. She took the final step toward the altar, and time seemed to stop once again. The bells fell silent. For a moment, the entire world went mute. Serena looked around, and every gaze bowed to hers. This wedding was never meant to happen. Then she turned to Damon, her eyes glistening with something caught between love and vengeance. You owe me more than a promise. Damon Wells. The silence that followed wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the beginning of everything about to collapse. The church sank into an impossible stillness, the kind that weighs on your shoulders and makes the air feel like glass. Guests exchanged uncertain looks, trapped between fear and fascination, trying to understand who this woman was, the one walking down the aisle with slow, steady steps and eyes that seemed to know how every story ends. Serena Vorse hadn't come to ask for forgiveness or to steal attention. She'd come to reclaim what time had tried to erase. The echo of her heels sounded like the ticking of an ancient clock, marking the return of everything Damon Wells had spent years pretending to forget. With each step, the walls seemed to close in, and the white flowers began to wilt before she even reached the altar. Claire Evans clutched her bouquet tightly, the petals trembling with her hands. She looked at Damon, searching for answers, but his eyes were locked on Serena, that look that said more than any vow ever could. The piano stopped. The final note hung in the air, and time bowed to the return of the fallen queen. He can't say yes. The words left Serena's lips like an ancient sentence, and no one dared to breathe. Her voice didn't shout, it cut. Every syllable was a polished blade, slicing through the air with precision. The priest froze. The holy book slipped from his hands and hit the floor, open to a passage about forgiveness. The irony was almost divine. A gust of wind tore through the stained glass, scattering petals down the aisle, as if the church itself recognized that something sacred had just been defiled. The guards in dark suits standing by the doors exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene or kneel. Serena didn't need weapons. She was the weapon. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried the memory of every broken promise, every love that ended with the metallic taste of betrayal. Damon stepped forward, his body torn between the urge to run and the need to stay. His heart pounded like a war drum, each beat a memory, each memory a debt. When his eyes met hers, the past came rushing back in full, the secret nights, the stolen kisses, the blood on his hands, the empire lost. Everything he'd tried to bury stood before him, dressed in black, with a gaze that mixed pain and power. Serena, the woman he loved, the woman he destroyed, the woman who came back. Claire tried to move, but one of Serena's guards blocked her way. She held her breath as the bouquet slipped from her hands, rolling across the floor, the petals scattering like fragments of a dream that should never have been. The murmur among the guests grew louder, low, trembling voices, as if everyone was afraid to name what they were seeing. Some whispered, "It's her," others just prayed, and a few glanced toward the exits, as if faith itself had become a way to escape. Serena stood perfectly still, staring at Damon with a gaze that seemed capable of deciding everyone's fate. Claire's white veil shifted in the breeze, and the contrast between the two women, one dressed in purity, the other in mourning, became the very metaphor of his life, between love and guilt, between what he owed and what he desired. Serena took a deep breath, and the church seemed to breathe with her, as though the entire world was waiting for what came next. Damon. Her voice split the air like thunder in the middle of calm. The name sounded both familiar and forbidden, an echo returning from heaven and hell at once. He closed his eyes, trying to deny what he felt, but it was useless. Her presence was memory, her gaze a sentence. Everything he had ever been was bound to that woman. Claire looked at her groom and saw what no bride should ever see, the man she loved staring at another woman as if he were seeing his own soul. The crowd held its breath, caught between fascination and terror. The ceremony was no longer a wedding, it was a trial. The altar, a courtroom. Love, the only witness. Serena took one step forward. The heel hit the ground with a sharp, steady sound, as if marking the exact spot where destiny decides whether to move forward or turn back. She lifted her chin, and the light from the stained glass bathed her in red and gold. For a brief moment she looked like a fallen saint, beautiful, wounded, untouchable. "This yes will cost lives," she said with deadly calm. The words lingered above them like a prophecy. The petals stopped falling. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Damon's throat tightened. Claire stepped back. The priest closed his book, folded his hands, and whispered something no one could hear. Serena didn't look at Claire. She didn't need to. Her presence alone shattered any illusion of innocence. Claire was merely a bridge, a tragic coincidence in a story that had begun long before she was born. Serena looked at Damon with a mix of rage and mercy. And within that gaze lived everything, the love that had survived death, the hatred that had fed on silence, and the forgiveness that still hadn't decided if it would come. The air grew heavy, thick, as if the entire city were listening. Outside, sirens began to wail. Inside, no one moved. "You know why I came back," she murmured. And Damon understood. It was both an accusation and a confession. The church seemed to tremble, the stained glass pulsing with the afternoon light. Claire closed her eyes, and a single tear fell, accepting defeat before it was spoken. There was no way to compete with the history Damon and Serena shared. This wasn't ordinary love, it was an ancient curse, a pact that time itself had failed to break. The wind blew again, carrying Serena's scent through the hall, a mix of memory and danger. Damon's heart raced, the memory of her touch burning through him like fire. He wanted to speak, to say something, but the words refused to come. And then she simply looked at him, a long, unbroken pause, as if she wanted him to feel everything she had felt when he left her. Love and hate collided in a single stare, and no one could tell which would win. The crowd was spellbound. A man crossed himself. A woman cried. Someone tried to record the scene on their phone, but their hands shook too much. It was more than a scandal. It was a reckoning, a return, a prophecy finally fulfilled. Serena drew a breath, and the air itself seemed to change color. "The past doesn't die, Damon," she said softly. "It just waits for the right moment to be remembered." Her voice echoed, and his heart answered even as he tried to deny it. The church was no longer a place of faith. It had become a battlefield. The altar, an arena, the flowers, silent witnesses. Light streamed through the stained glass like golden blood, painting faces and sins alike. Serena and Damon stood face to face, and between them stretched the abyss of everything they could have been. Claire stood motionless, watching, not as an enemy, but as someone who had just understood the price of true love. And as time folded around them, everyone realized that this wedding was never meant to happen. Serena took half a step forward and lifted her gaze. There was no crown on her head, yet the world seemed to bow before her. The lost queen had returned, not to ask for mercy, but to claim what had been promised. Around her the air trembled, as if history itself was holding its breath to see what would come next. Damon Wells's face had gone pale. Serena's voice still echoed against the church walls like a curse time had forgotten to erase. He tried to move, but his body felt carved from stone, trapped between the altar and the abyss. Every glance cast his way weighed like a verdict. Outside the bells tolled, but their sound felt distant, meaningless. Inside him only silence remained, the same silence that had followed him since the night Serena disappeared. Then, slowly, the memories returned, heavy and sharp, cutting through the present like invisible blades. Time twisted before his eyes. The golden ceiling of the church faded, replaced by the pale shimmer of a rainy night. He saw her again. Serena, leaning against the window, a lit cigarette trembling between her fingers, her gaze lost somewhere he could never reach. "Promise me you'll never leave," she had said, and he had lied with conviction. He had promised what he could never keep, believing love was enough to protect them both. Now he understood. Love alone saves no one. The flashes came back in fragments, like scenes from a forgotten film. A stolen kiss in the rain, a body running through the dark, a pact sealed in blood. Serena laughing in the shadows, the scar on her shoulder catching the light of the lighter. He'd always thought that scar was a symbol of strength, but now he saw it for what it was. A reminder. A debt. Every memory of Serena carried the scent of gunpowder and perfume. And not one of them ended well. Claire was still there, motionless, her face as pale as the veil now dragging across the floor. She watched the man she loved drift into a past she could never understand. Damon no longer saw her. His eyes were locked on something beyond time, a living memory pulsing beneath his skin. It was as if Serena had reopened an old wound that had never truly healed. The crowd could see the conflict written across his face, the despair of a man who loves two women but belongs to only one story. The echo of Serena's heels still rang in his mind. Each sound, a memory. Each memory, a guilt. He tried to push the past away, but the past is patient. It knows how to wait. And now, before everyone, Damon realized there was nothing left to hide. Serena wasn't just the lost love. She was the memory of who he truly was, the man who loved danger, defied the world, and lost everything the moment he believed he could find peace. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the stained glass like impatient fingers. Inside the church, the air hung thick, heavy with secrets and shallow breaths. Serena watched him, her gaze steady, her body still. She looked almost unreal. She didn't need words. Her silence said everything. He remembered her touch, the warmth and the fear that always came with it, as if their love had been a collapsing house, dangerous, broken, but impossible to leave. For a moment, he wanted to run to her, just like before, when the world was a minefield and love was the only thing that felt true. But now there was Claire, the altar, and new promises built upon old lies. Damon knew one truth: you don't escape the same fate twice. Serena looked at him with something that might have been pity, or maybe too much love, the kind of love that wounds more than it heals. He tried to speak, but the words got stuck somewhere between regret and fear. "Why now?" he murmured, more to himself than to her. Serena didn't answer. Her eyes glimmered with the memory of everything he had failed to see. She didn't hate him, not yet, but she didn't forgive him either, and that silence between them said more than any vow could. It was the sound of something that never truly died, only waited for the right moment to return. Damon's face twisted between guilt and longing. He remembered the last night before the tragedy, her touch, the smell of gunpowder, the crash of the door being kicked in, the chaos, the shots, the blood, and then the emptiness. When he found her on the floor, he thought the world had ended. When they told him she was dead, he believed it. Because believing was easier than living with doubt. And now, standing before her, the truth hurt more than any lie ever could. Claire stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Damon, what's happening?" He turned to her, and her eyes hit him like shards of broken glass. There was tenderness there, but also despair. He tried to explain, but the past doesn't take explanations. Serena's name still lingered in the air like a forbidden prayer. And Claire understood, in painful clarity, that she could never win against that kind of love, the kind born from chaos and kept alive by pain. Serena gave a faint, bitter smile, almost human. "You don't have to explain, Damon," she said quietly, her tone calm but cutting. "I already understand." There was a strange peace in her voice. Not forgiveness, realization, the kind of calm that comes when a wound no longer bleeds, but never truly heals. She turned her face toward the light, and the stained glass painted her skin in fire. The fallen queen looked ready for a war no one knew was coming. The crowd watched in silence, hypnotized, as if witnessing a performance caught between tragedy and redemption. And for a fleeting moment, Damon wished it would all end right there, that the ground would open, that pain would finally give way to oblivion, but nothing ended. Serena's gaze held him captive, and inside that gaze lived a quiet reminder he had promised not to leave her, and he broke that promise. The rain turned into a storm. Thunder rattled the stained glass, and the cross above the altar trembled with the force. Serena lifted her head, the reflection of the rain shimmering in her eyes. "You still don't know what you've lost, Damon," she whispered. He felt his stomach twist. He knew that wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Something was coming. Something bigger than both of them. The bells rang again, but this time they sounded like mourning. Damon looked around and saw confused, frightened faces. Faith had blended with fear. The sacred and the profane were dancing beneath the same roof. And for a brief, crushing moment he understood. Hell wasn't a distant place. It was this. It was her. Serena, alive, standing before him. Time froze completely. Serena took a deep breath, and the world seemed to breathe with her. Claire fell to her knees, flowers slipping from her hands, the bouquet scattered across the cold floor. Damon closed his eyes, and everything faded, except her. Serena, alive. Serena, eternal. Serena, the memory that condemned him. When he opened his eyes again, the church no longer looked the same. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and the past walked among the pews. He knew then that nothing was over. The ghost of the past hadn't come to haunt, it had come to collect. The rain intensified as the church doors swung open, swallowing the sound of bells and the confusion of the crowd. The air was heavy, the scent of wet earth and gasoline mixing with Serena's expensive perfume. 2 black cars waited outside, engines running, headlights glowing against the rain-soaked asphalt. The men in dark suits, the same silent figures from inside, now moved with precision, rehearsed and obedient to one voice, hers. Serena walked toward the car with steady steps, never looking back. Damon hesitated for a heartbeat, his soul torn between the sobbing bride and the woman who stole his breath simply by existing. When Serena turned her head, her gaze alone gave the order that broke him, "Come," and he did. The engine roared like a beast awakened. Rain hammered against the windows, its muffled rhythm blending with the sound of shallow breaths. In the seat beside her, Damon clenched his fists against his knees, his body tense, his gaze lost somewhere between fear and memory. Serena watched his reflection in the glass, the tired face, the wrinkled suit, the engagement ring still glinting like a cruel joke. "Do you still believe in happy endings?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. Damon turned away, silent. He didn't answer, because he knew that with Serena, nothing ever ended, it only changed shape. The car sped through the wet streets, cutting across the city like an arrow. The streetlights flashed by, each glow reflecting pieces of a past he could no longer outrun. Serena slowly removed her gloves, revealing old scars across her hands, reminders of battles Damon had never fully understood. "You owe me something," she said, her eyes fixed ahead. "And it's not love." The words hung in the air, heavy as confession. He wanted to ask what she meant, but something in her tone stopped him. He knew Serena never asked. She commanded. The silence between them was thick, almost tangible. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating her face for a fleeting moment. Serena looked carved from the storm, strong, cold, beautiful in a way that hurt. Damon remembered what she used to say on sleepless nights, surrounded by bodyguards and secrets. "Love is just another form of power, Damon, and whoever gives it away loses everything." He hadn't believed her then, but now he understood. Serena hadn't come back for nostalgia. She'd come for war, and without realizing it, he was part of the weapon. The car stopped in front of an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. The doors swung open with a metallic crash that echoed like thunder. Serena stepped out first, her heels sinking into the mud. The men followed in silence, clearing a path for her through the dark corridor. Damon stood still for a moment, the cold wind slicing across his face. When he finally followed, his heartbeat quickened. It felt like crossing into forbidden ground. The air inside smelled of rust and bad memories. Serena turned to him and said, "Lock the doors." He obeyed without knowing why. The echo of their footsteps filled the hollow space. Serena walked to a metal table and threw an old, fire-scorched folder onto it. "It's all here," she said, snapping it open. "Photos, documents, maps, familiar faces, including his own." Serena stepped closer, her eyes glinting with a mix of fury and grief. "You broke the pact," she whispered. "And because of that, 3 people died." The words hit like gunfire. He tried to deny it, but she cut him off. "Don't speak. Just listen." She pulled out another photo. Victor Haley, the former advisor. The man Damon once trusted. The same man who had helped him escape when everything collapsed. Serena's fingers brushed over the picture like someone touching an old wound. "He sold me out, Damon. And you believed him." His blood ran cold. Memories collided. Lies, fear, manipulation. Suddenly it all made sense. Her disappearance, the fall of their empire, the pain he could never explain. Victor had been behind it all. And without knowing, Damon had helped the enemy. Serena turned toward him, her eyes glistening but her face steady. "You buried me alive," she said softly. "And then you went and played husband, as if love were just another disguise." Damon tried to move closer, but she raised her hand. "Don't touch me." Her voice trembled, but her command was absolute. "You had 5 years to find me. You chose to forget. Now I'm back. And I want what's mine." The silence that followed felt almost solid. He tried to speak, but her stare silenced him again. Serena didn't need to shout. Her presence alone filled the air. Outside, thunder rolled in answer to her restrained fury. Serena turned to one of her men and whispered something. He nodded and walked out. Damon realized too late what was happening. "You have 5 minutes to listen, or 5 seconds to run." Her tone left no room for doubt. The woman standing before him was not the one he had loved. Serena Vorse was gone, and in her place stood something far more dangerous. Damon stepped forward cautiously. "What do you want, Serena?" The question came out broken, almost like a plea. She studied him for a long moment before answering, "Truth." She walked toward him, stopping close enough for him to smell her perfume, the same as before, now laced with gunpowder. "You don't get it, Damon. All that's left of us is a debt, and I came to collect." Rain pounded against the warehouse windows, the sound like distant applause. Serena turned a chair around and sat, crossing her legs with mechanical grace. "You believed I betrayed you, and still you tried to replace me. But what ties you to me isn't love, it's guilt. Damon stayed silent, his eyes unfocused. She was right. She always had been. Now, she continued, her voice low and certain, you're going to listen, and when I'm done, you'll decide whether you can still live with it. She opened a drawer and pulled out a gun. She didn't point it, she simply placed it on the table between them. A symbolic gesture, heavy, deliberate. This isn't a threat. It's a reminder. Because what we had was always like this, built from fear and desire. Her fingers brushed the cold metal, the sound echoing through the empty warehouse. You want redemption? Then prove to me you still have courage. Damon drew a deep breath. His heart felt as if it were beating outside his body. He knew Serena wasn't a woman who played with words. She was testing him, challenging him. What do I have to do? He asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Serena leaned forward over the table, her eyes locked on his. Look at the past, she said, without running from it. For a moment, neither of them moved. The sound of the storm faded to a distant hum, and in that tense silence, Damon realized Serena wasn't after revenge. She was after the truth. But truth, when revealed, can kill faster than a bullet. She stood and walked toward him, stopped so close the air between them seemed to burn. 5 minutes, Damon. After that, nothing will ever be the same. And he believed her because in her eyes there was something more dangerous than hatred. There was love. And love, when wounded, is the deadliest weapon of all. The rain hadn't stopped when Serena got back into the car. The sound of raindrops against the windows formed a slow, hypnotic rhythm, like a clock ticking down to something about to collapse. Damon Wells sat beside her, his body still trembling from the conversation in the warehouse. Neither spoke for several long minutes. The city outside slid past in flashes, blurred by lights and by the past that refused to let them go. The engine hummed softly, but the real noise was the silence, thick, alive, filled with everything they had never been able to forget. Serena lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the sharp line of her face. Her eyes stayed fixed on the road, though her mind was somewhere else. Another time, another life. Damon watched her reflection in the glass. She looked like a living memory, suspended somewhere between love and pain. You still don't understand, do you? She asked without turning her head. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back because some truths kill slowly. The smoke curled upward in slow spirals, dancing with her words. Damon looked away, but her voice held him there, like he couldn't breathe anywhere she wasn't. He tried to speak, but Serena cut him off. You broke the pact, Damon. The words fell between them like a sentence. And the pact wasn't about power or money. It was about survival. Her tone was cold, but a faint tremor hid beneath the calm. You left me when hell opened its doors. Damon turned, his eyes wet. I thought you were dead. She gave a faint smile. Not of joy, but resignation. And believing that was easier than looking for me. The tension between them filled the air like smoke. Damon reached out, hesitant, but she pulled back. Don't. Her voice was steady, though her eyes betrayed fear. Don't try to fix what you destroyed. He withdrew his hand, his fingers trembling. He wanted to say he still loved her, but the words felt too small for everything between them. Their love had always lived in extremes. They never knew how to exist in calm waters. And there, surrounded by shadows and rain, desire returned like an open wound, pulsing between guilt and longing. Serena turned her face toward him. The look she gave was a fragile collision of anger and longing. Do you know what's worse than hating someone? She asked softly. Still loving them. After everything, Damon didn't answer. He just took a deep breath, the sound nearly lost beneath the storm outside. He understood exactly what she meant, because he felt it too. Hatred was easy. Love was what demanded courage. And he didn't have much left. The car rolled to a stop on the shoulder of the road. Serena crushed out her cigarette and sat in silence for several long seconds. Rain streamed down the windows, tracing crooked paths, as if the storm itself were trying to tell their story. "Look at me, Damon," she said quietly. He did. The streetlights reflected in her eyes, and for the first time he saw something there he never had before: fragility. "I never ran from you," Serena said. "I ran from who I was when I was with you." The words hit deep. Damon's chest tightened, the weight of old pain pressing in again. "And who were you?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Serena turned her gaze away. "A woman who believed love could save monsters." Silence returned, heavier now, almost cruel. Damon lowered his head. "I never wanted to lose you," he whispered. "But you did," she replied, "because you never fought for me." The sound of the rain grew louder. The car seemed to breathe with them. Damon turned toward her, eyes wet. "Then why did you come back?" Serena met his gaze, unwavering. "Because there's still something between us," she said. "And that scares me more than death." Her eyes trembled, and for a fleeting moment the mask of the mafia queen fell away. In its place was the woman, the one who had loved, been betrayed, and somehow survived. Damon saw his own regret reflected in her eyes, and something inside him broke. Without thinking, he reached for her hand. Serena hesitated, but didn't pull away. The touch was familiar and painful, like pressing on a wound that never healed. "Do you hate me?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes studied him, the rough beard, the tired expression, the man time had punished. "I hate you for leaving me," she finally whispered. "But I hate even more the fact that I still love you." The world seemed to stop. The sound of rain vanished, time itself bending around them. Damon leaned closer, but Serena turned her face, trying to hold on to her composure. "Don't do this," she whispered, her breath trembling. "I can't." He cut her off, voice low and rough. "But I can." And before she could react, he kissed her. The kiss was slow, fierce, heavy with everything they'd never said. There was no gentleness in it, only need. Their love was a wound reopening. Serena tried to resist, but her body betrayed her. The taste of the past, the heat, the memories of who they once were, it all came rushing back at once. When she finally pushed him away, tears glistened in her eyes. "This shouldn't have happened," she whispered. Damon looked at her, his voice barely audible. "It always does." The silence that followed was devastating. Serena rested her forehead against the window, watching the water slide down the glass. "I should hate you for this," she murmured. "But the truth is, I never knew how to hate you enough." Damon leaned back in his seat, exhausted. "So what do we do now?" he asked quietly. Serena drew a deep breath, her expression turning cold again. "Now?" she said. "Now you help me destroy Victor Hale." The words fell between them like a sentence, but also like redemption. The same love that had once torn them apart would now bind them again, not out of passion, but necessity. Damon nodded slowly, his heart splintered beyond repair. Serena lit another cigarette, the flame illuminating her eyes. "Between hate and desire," she said, exhaling smoke. "That's where we've always lived." The car pulled back onto the road, the sound of the engine swallowed by the storm. Outside, thunder ripped through the sky. Inside, two broken souls made an unspoken decision. Their war wouldn't only be against Victor. It would be against everything they still felt for each other. And maybe, in the end, one of them wouldn't survive what love had left standing. The road stretched into darkness as the city lights faded behind them. The storm had eased, but the sky still pulsed with distant thunder. Damon Wells stared at the horizon, his heart beat uneven, his body already aware that something irreversible was coming. Serena drove steadily, her hands firm on the wheel, her expression composed, but her eyes carried something he still couldn't decipher. The woman beside him wasn't just the mafia queen he feared, nor the lover who haunted his dreams. She was the mirror of his past, the one he'd tried to erase, now returned and demanding answers. When the car stopped, they were in front of a secluded mansion surrounded by tall walls and twisted trees. The old facade seemed to watch them, as if the house itself kept too many secrets. Serena stepped out first, her heels striking the stone path with a sharp echo. Damon hesitated before following, but her glance drew him forward, a command disguised as a look. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp wood and aged wine. Heavy curtains blocked any trace of daylight. Only candles lit the hallways, their flickering glow casting restless shadows along the walls, like ghosts waiting to be acknowledged. "Welcome back to the beginning," Serena said, pushing open a side door. The creak of the hinges sounded like a warning. Damon stepped inside, and the chill hit him instantly. The room was small, lined with files and stacked boxes. On the table, an old film projector whirred softly, casting a sequence of images across the wall. Familiar faces, armed men, secret meetings. And at the center of it all, Victor Hale, the man he'd called a brother, the man who destroyed everything. "He betrayed me, Damon," Serena said quietly. "But you never wanted to see it." The images shifted, revealing black and white footage. Damon saw himself, years younger, sitting beside Victor at a long table. He remembered that day, the deal, the promises, the expensive wine. But the video showed more. It showed Victor sending messages, transmitting coordinates. It showed a traitor operating right under his nose. And finally, the cruelest part, Serena being dragged away by force, while Victor stood at a distance, watching, expressionless. "It was him," she said, her voice breaking. "And you helped him, Damon? Not out of malice, but out of blindness." Damon took a step back, his body tense, heart pounding. No, this can't be real. But Serena just watched him, silent and steady. "I spent years in captivity because of him," she said. "I was tortured, silenced, erased from the map. And you thought I abandoned you." Her words fell like stones, heavy and undeniable. He pressed a trembling hand to his face, as if he could wipe away the image before him, but it stayed, alive, cruel, inescapable. "You didn't know, Damon," she went on, her voice breaking but firm. "But when you believed Victor, you killed everything good that ever existed between us." The silence that followed was impossible to break. Damon sank into a chair, the weight of regret settling deep into his bones. I tried to find you," he whispered. Serena stepped closer, staring down at him. "You tried just enough to sleep at night." Her tone wasn't bitter, just factual. It was the voice of someone who had already cried everything they had to cry, and now only wanted to be understood. "I screamed your name, Damon, over and over. But you were too busy believing the man who whispered promises of power." He lifted his gaze. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Serena gave a short, tired laugh. "Because no one comes back from hell and explains what they saw. You only come back if there's still something left to settle." She turned away, lighting another candle. The glow revealed a fresh scar along the side of her neck, deep, old, carved by violence. "They tried to erase me. Victor wanted the empire, and you were the perfect alibi. The guilty heir. The man who mourned the wrong woman." Damon lowered his head, the sound of the wind rattling the windows like a lament. Serena took a long breath. "But I survived. And when I escaped, I found out what he'd done with everything that was ours. Our business, our allies, our secrets." Her voice grew sharper, gaining strength with every word. "He sold every piece of us. And now, Damon, I want back what's left." He rose slowly, confusion and fear in his eyes. "And what's left, Serena?" She stepped closer until her face was inches from his. "You." For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Damon felt his lungs tighten, his breath stolen away. Her hand brushed his arm, brief, but enough to reignite what he'd spent years trying to bury. His heart raced, but fear spoke louder. "What are you going to do with me?" he asked, his voice trembling. Serena studied him for a long time before answering. "That depends. On what? On whether you're still the man who loved me, or the coward who buried me." He couldn't answer. Her gaze reflected everything he feared most about himself. Serena took 2 steps back, removed a necklace from around her neck, and tossed it onto the table. Inside the pendant, a small golden chip glinted in the candlelight. "This is what Victor tried to hide. Proof, transactions, murders, everything." Her eyes locked on his. "With this, we destroy him. But I need to know, Damon, are you with me this time?" Thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the room. The wind blew through the cracks, snuffing out half the candles. Damon stood still, the weight of the decision pressing against his chest. Serena watched him, impatient but vulnerable, hope flickering behind the steel of her stare. "I never stopped loving you," he said finally, his voice low and raw. She turned away, unable to meet his eyes. "Don't say that now," she whispered. "Love doesn't erase what happened." He took a step forward. "Maybe it can't erase the past," he said softly, "but maybe it can change what comes after." Serena closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, let the tears fall. They caught the candlelight, glimmering as they slid down her face, slow, heavy, as if time itself were weeping with her. "I waited to hear that, Damon," she whispered. "But the debt isn't paid yet." The projector clicked off on its own, plunging the room into darkness. Serena turned away, her body rigid, her heart divided. Tomorrow, Victor will pay for what he's done. But tonight, her voice broke slightly. "Tonight, I need to remember who I was before he made me what I am." Damon stepped closer, placing a cautious hand on her shoulder. She didn't move, just closed her eyes and let the touch linger. For a fleeting moment, the past seemed to breathe again. The shadows softened, the wind died, and the world stood still. Serena Vorse, the woman the world believed dead, was alive. And inside her still beat a heart split between love and vengeance. And Damon, standing before her, finally understood what he never had. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free, it just shows you who you've become. By the time they left the mansion, the sun was rising. The wet road reflected the pale light of dawn, the world hanging somewhere between the end of something and the beginning of a war. Neither spoke. The golden chip rested on the car's dashboard, too small to hold the weight of so much blood, so many lives, so many secrets. Serena stared at it with the distant look of someone carrying too much in her soul. Damon, beside her, tried to piece together the enormity of it all. Victor's lies, his own blindness, what he'd lost, and what he'd still might. Yet between them, a quiet, dangerous truth was stirring. The love they had buried was breathing again. When they reached the city, chaos was waiting. Headlines screamed, news portals buzzed. Familiar faces filled the screens. Victor Hale had struck first. The reports named Serena Vorse a fugitive, accused of data manipulation, embezzlement, and murder. And Damon Wells's name appeared right beside hers as her accomplice. He looked at her in silence, tension sharp across his face. "He knows we're coming," Serena said flatly, eyes fixed on the road. "And now he wants to turn love into a crime." Her tone was calm, but venom hid in every word. Hours later, Damon's phone vibrated. One message, just a single line. "The altar was never yours." "It was mine, Victor." The words burned through his mind like fire. Serena grabbed the phone and hurled it out the window without hesitation. "He's taunting us." Damon said nothing. The memory of the wedding, of her walking into the church, of Claire, all returned like a haunting echo. The altar, the roses, the chaos, none of it had been chance. Victor had orchestrated everything, their love, her supposed death, his marriage to Claire. It was all part of the same game. Anger rose in him like a wave. His fists tightened. "He used her," Damon said, voice trembling. Serena's gaze was cold, cutting. Not just her, he used you too. He wanted you to believe I betrayed you. He wanted me erased so he could rule what was left of the empire. And he did. She pulled the car to a stop and drew a long breath. But not for long. Her eyes burned with fury, with exhaustion, with resolve, and Damon understood. What was coming wasn't revenge. It was justice. But justice, in the hands of Serena Vorse, had always tasted like war. They returned to her hideout, where old memories still hung in the air. Trusted men waited in silence, showing the respect reserved for a resurrected queen. Serena climbed the stairs with steady steps, her heels echoing like a command. Damon followed, feeling the weight of the walls. Everything there had a story. Everything smelled of the past. And in the center of the room, on the table, an open dossier. Photos, maps, and one recent image. Claire Evans, the bride. He put her in your path, Damon. Claire was never a coincidence. She was the bait. Silence hit like thunder. Damon stared at the photos, his face drained. This is a lie. Serena crossed her arms. I wish it were, but Victor is meticulous. He needed someone pure, someone the world would trust. And he needed you to cling to her. To love her enough to forget me. It was the only way to keep you from the truth. Her words burned slowly, like venom. Damon braced himself on the table, breathing shallowly. Did she know? He asked. Serena nodded. She knew, maybe not everything, but enough to be guilty. Damon swayed, his hands trembling. He remembered Claire's smile, the way she avoided talking about the past, how she deflected questions with practiced sweetness. It all fit. The wedding, the confusion, her appearance at the exact moment, each of his steps had been guided. My God, he breathed. Serena stepped closer, voice low, almost consoling. He destroyed what we were. He used love as a chain. But today that ends. She touched his shoulder, a firm gesture, full of tenderness. You're going to help me take down the altar he built. Downstairs, one of the men rushed in, out of breath. We have company, he said. Serena turned, her gaze sharp. Who? The man hesitated. Claire Evans. The room fell silent. Damon looked up, his heart pounding. She's here? The guard nodded. She wants to talk to you. Says she needs to explain. Serena took a step forward, but Damon gripped her arm. Let me go. She looked at him for a moment, then gave in. 5 minutes, she said, cold. Not one more. Claire stood outside under a cloudy sky, her wedding dress replaced by a simple coat. Her face was tired, her eyes wet. Damon, I swear I didn't know everything, she blurted before he could speak. Victor made me believe it was for love. That you needed me. Her words came fast, shaking with desperation. Damon took a step toward her, but the distance between them felt impossible to cross. You lied to me, he said, voice breaking. You made me believe in something pure when it was all part of a game, Claire cried. I tried to protect you. He shook his head. Protect who, Claire? Me, or the man who sent you to me? She didn't answer. The wind cut cold, as if the world itself passed judgment. Serena watched from the window, her face unreadable, but her eyes burning. Inside her there was compassion and pain. She saw in Claire what she had once been, a woman used by a man who claimed to love her. Damon turned his back and went inside, breathing roughly. Serena waited on the stairs. He stopped in front of her, exhausted, defeated. He destroyed everything, he murmured. Then let's rebuild it. Our way, Serena replied. Her eyes shone with a cold determination. But for that, the altar has to fall. He looked at her, confused. What do you mean? Serena stepped closer, her lips almost brushing his ear. I mean that, for Victor to lose, we're going to have to get married. Damon stepped back, startled. Married? He repeated, incredulous. Serena nodded slowly, eyes glinting like a blade catching light. He thinks love is our weakness, she said, but it will be our weapon. We're going to make him watch the ceremony he planned, only this time from the other side. Her smile was enigmatic, dangerous, a secret sharpened into strategy. Damon understood her plan, a game of mirrors, to turn the trap into redemption. "Do you trust me?" she asked quietly. He drew in a breath, eyes steady on hers. "After everything." "I still do." Serena's lips curved into her first real smile. "Then put on the suit, Wells," she murmured, "because the altar's going to burn." The rain returned, soft, relentless, washing away the dust and blood of the past. Serena descended the stairs, her black coat flowing behind her like a war banner. Her men stood aligned, silent, disciplined. For a fleeting moment, Damon saw what she truly was, not just returning to fight, but to reclaim everything that had been stolen from her power, her empire, and the man she once loved. And deep within her eyes burned something time could never extinguish, the faith that even among ruins 2 hearts could begin again. But for that to happen, someone would have to fall. The underworld had no mercy. In the depths of the city, hidden from the eyes of the law, stood a hall carved from stone and iron, lit only by crimson lights and the faint reflection of rain, trickling through the cracks above. It was there that final decisions were made, where right and wrong dissolved and power wore the face of justice. Serena Voss entered first, flanked by her men. Her heels struck the ground in measured rhythm, echoing through the chamber like the march of a returning queen. A ripple of whispers spread like fire through the crowd. "She's back." Damon Wells followed close behind, his expression hard, his soul torn between guilt and devotion. The place seemed to breathe, alive, hostile, as though the very walls recognized the weight of their sins. Old portraits of powerful men lined the walls, their gazes frozen in judgment, like silent witnesses of another age. Serena stopped in the center of the hall, her eyes rising to the empty throne, the same one where Victor Haley had once sat while she obeyed. Now he was gone, and the throne waited. "Tonight," she declared, her voice resonating through the stone columns, "the empire belongs to its rightful owner again." A tall man stepped forward from the crowd, Lorenzo Marchesi, one of Victor's former allies. His expression was carved in stone. "You've got nerve coming back, Serena," he said, his tone heavy with warning. "But nerve doesn't wash away blood." She tilted her head slightly, smiling, cold, controlled. "And fear doesn't protect the ones who betrayed me." The murmurs grew louder, tension rippling through the room. Damon felt every gaze shift toward him. He knew what was coming. This night wasn't just a return, it was a reckoning, and he would be the first to stand trial. Serena raised a hand, and 2 guards pushed him forward into the center. Damon didn't resist. He stood tall, breath shallow, heart racing. Serena stepped closer, her presence commanding the air. "He believed lies," she said, her voice cutting through the room. "He abandoned the empire. He let the name Voss be dragged through the mud." The crowd murmured, some in agreement, others in tense silence. "But he was also deceived by the same man who tried to destroy me, Victor Haley." She began circling him slowly, every movement deliberate, predatory. "And that's why tonight he'll answer not only for his mistakes." Her eyes met his, burning with something deeper, something neither love nor hate could name. "But for the man he still has the chance to become." Lorenzo watched her with distrust. What makes him worthy of forgiveness? Serena stopped and met his eyes. "The fact that he still loves what he destroyed." The words fell like steel. The hall went silent. Damon looked at her, confused, his heart thudding in his chest. There was something in those words between the lines, something only he understood. Serena wasn't just defending him. She was proving something to everyone, that love was still the most unpredictable weapon in the underworld. "Love?" Lorenzo sneered. "Here, that's weakness." Serena stepped forward, her gaze flashing. "No, Weakness is forgetting what made you fight. Then she turned to the crowd, her voice cutting through the air. For years you followed a traitor. Victor Haley destroyed alliances, sold names, killed innocents, and you stayed silent. I didn't come back to beg for mercy. I came back to demand justice. And the first act is this. She pointed at Damon. The guards raised their weapons. His heart leapt. But before the bolt could click, Serena raised a hand. No one fires. A murmur of astonishment ran through the hall. He will pay in another way. He will fight at my side. Together we will destroy the man who made us enemies. The crowd split in reaction, half approved, half muttered in outrage. Damon lowered his gaze, feeling the weight of her decision. Serena closed in slowly until their faces were almost touching. Do you still have a loyal heart, Damon Wells? She asked, voice low, almost a whisper. He answered without hesitation. I do, and it still beats for you. The reply made the air tremble. The onlookers stared, stunned. It was more than a confession. It was a pact. Serena looked away for a moment, as if his words had cut deeper than any weapon. Then prove it, she said, steady once more. Prove it by fighting for what you lost. Her tone mixed command with plea, the echo of a woman who still loved but no longer trusted. Lorenzo stepped forward, furious. He doesn't deserve a second chance. Serena faced him, ice cold. Neither do you, yet you still breathe. The man backed down. The crowd murmured, impressed. Her authority was unquestionable. The guards lowered their guns. Serena walked to the throne and stood before it. Silence settled. The underworld needs balance, she said. Balance only returns when truth replaces lies. She turned to Damon. The truth is, this man made mistakes. But he didn't run. Unlike those who hid behind an empire. The crowd reacted. Tension was thick. Victor's name circulated like a shadow. Damon stepped forward. If you let me, I'll bring Victor here myself. He will answer for everything he did. Serena looked at him, surprised. For a moment, pride flickered in her eyes. You couldn't do it, she said, almost challengingly. I won't go alone, he answered. The silence broke. Serena studied him a long moment before smiling. That rare smile, half pain, half courage. Then maybe redemption still exists for us. Applause began small, then swelled. The hall shook with shouts, fists in the air, vows of loyalty. The queen had returned. The judgment was over. Damon watched her, his heart split between fear and fascination. Serena sat on the throne as the red light bathed her face. For an instant she looked weary, but at peace. The underworld had a leader again, and that leader had a purpose, Victor Hale. As the applause died down, Serena lowered her gaze to her hands. They were shaking. Damon stepped closer and whispered quietly, so only she could hear. Do you still love me? She didn't answer right away. She only looked at him, and in that look was what no words could say. Love, anger, forgiveness, loss, all mixed together. I don't know what love is anymore, Damon, but I know what fate is. And it still wants you by my side. The distant sound of sirens echoed through the night, a sign that the world outside was beginning to notice what was coming. The judgment was over, but the war had only just begun. And while Serena Voss reigned again from the ruins, Damon Wells understood that the underworld doesn't judge with scales, it judges with the heart, and hers, though wounded, still beat for him. Dawn weighed heavy on the city. The underworld seemed to breathe again, but the air was thick with rumors and fear. Serena Voss watched the night from the mansion window, eyes fixed on the distant lights where Victor Hale still pulled his invisible strings. Candles cast a soft yellow glow across the room, reflecting in the glass the face of a woman who looked untouchable yet carried an unseen war inside. The throne, now back at the center of the hall, wasn't a symbol of victory. It was a reminder of everything that had to die for her return. Damon entered silently. His dark jacket, his exhausted look, hands stained with fresh blood. The mission to eliminate one of Victor's allies had been completed. It's over, he said, but the words sounded hollow, as if it no longer meant anything. Serena didn't answer. She only watched him in the window's reflection. "Nothing's over until he's dead," she said at last. The words were calm, but their tone was an icicle. Damon moved closer slowly, stopping a few steps away. "And what's left after that?" The question hung between them, heavy. Serena took her time. "After, maybe us. If there's anything left to call us." Silence took over. Rain began to fall outside, the sound of the drops mingling with Damon's racing heartbeat. He knew their love was a minefield, every step a dangerous memory. But he also knew that, without her, nothing remained. "You don't trust me, do you?" he asked with a tired smile. Serena finally turned, her face lit by the flicker of a candle. "Trust is a luxury we lost when they left me to die." Her voice trembled, but her eyes did not. Still, beneath the armor there was something, a flash of pain she couldn't hide. He moved closer until their breaths mixed. "I don't want you to forgive me," Damon said, his voice hoarse. "I want you to use me. Make me the weapon you need to end him." Serena held his gaze for a long moment, as if trying to read whether his words came from redemption or from despair. "Are you willing to die for me?" she asked, her tone practiced and cold. He didn't hesitate. "I already died when I thought I lost you." For a moment, the world stopped. The air felt both lighter and crueler at the same time. Serena looked away, unable to bear what she saw in his eyes. "You always knew how to make me weak," she murmured. Damon stepped forward and cupped her face gently, his fingers trembling. "I don't want to make you weak, Serena. I want to remind you who you were before the hate." She drew a deep breath but didn't pull her hands away. "And who was I, Damon?" "You were the woman who believed love could be stronger than fear." She closed her eyes, and for an instant the shield fell. Her body relaxed, her voice faltered. "I don't know what love is anymore." He moved closer, not to kiss her, but to let the warmth between them fill the space. "Love, Serena, is what still keeps you alive." The sentence hung there, breaking something inside her. She pushed him away, but without force. "Don't say that. I can't be weak now." Damon held his ground, his eyes fixed on hers. "Being weak is fighting alone." She retreated to the throne, trying to regain control. "Love is a distraction." "Victor taught me that." "No," Damon answered, stepping forward again. "Victor taught you fear. I want to teach you the opposite." Serena stopped, her gaze lost. "And what if the opposite is my ruin?" "Then we fall together." His reply was immediate, instinctive, sincere. She looked at him, first surprised, then with something that looked like faith in someone she herself had buried. They were silent for a long time. Outside, thunder drew closer, and the wind rattled the shutters. Serena sat on the throne, her stare distant. "Do you know why Victor never killed me?" she asked without meeting his eyes. Damon remained still. "Because he knew love was my weakness. And now he'll try to use it again." Damon knelt before her, his gaze steady. "Then let him try. Because this time, love will be our weapon." The words echoed through the hall. Serena watched him, surprised by his certainty. "Do you really believe that?" she asked, almost a whisper. "I believe in what we might still be," he said. She inhaled slowly, her chest rising and falling. "You don't know the price of that." Damon took her hand. "I know, and I've already agreed to pay it." Time seemed to freeze. Serena looked at his hand, torn between pulling away or surrendering. In the end, she did neither. "If he comes after me, Damon, I don't want pity." He nodded. "And if he comes after me, I want you to live." She smiled sadly. "You still talk like the hero, and you still pretend to be the villain." She rose slowly, her face inches from his. "Tomorrow everything changes," she said, firm. "Victor will fall, and when he does, the empire will be ours, if there's any empire left." He smiled faintly. "And if there isn't?" she breathed, steady. "Then all that's left is love." The storm swallowed their last words. Serena leaned in and rested her forehead against his, the most intimate thing she could offer without breaking. Her heart pounded, her eyes closed, tears held back. "Don't die for me, Damon. Live for us. He cupped her face with both hands. I only live for us. And there, amid the ruins of an empire, under the weight of everything they had lost, love became the final weapon. Silent, invisible, but relentless. Because in the end, it was the one power Victor Hale had never been able to control. Night fell over the mansion like the calm before a storm. The windows rattled in the wind, and the distant sound of a helicopter cut through the sky. Serena Vorse stood on the terrace, her black coat fluttering like a torn flag. The city below seemed asleep, but danger was already on its way. Damon Wells carried a gun, and his regret. His palms were slick with sweat. His heart beat in sync with the thunder. He's coming tonight, she said, not turning to look at him. Victor was never the kind of man who waited. Damon drew a long breath. Then tonight. It all ends. Inside, the corridors were swallowed by shadow. Armed men took their positions, arranged like chess pieces, on a board already stained with old blood. Serena moved among them in silence, her eyes sharp, her posture steady. Inside, fear still lived, but she caged it, mastering it like someone who had already been betrayed by everything, even love. Damon followed her, his gaze locked on her every move. Each step echoed like a countdown. Outside, the gates burst open, engines roared. The past had arrived, with bullets and vengeance. Victor Hale stepped out of his car with the calm of a man who believed he'd already won. Impeccable suit, cold smile. The devil had a human face and the voice of a memory. "Serena," he said as he walked across the courtyard, the woman who even death couldn't keep down. She took a step forward, fearless. And the man who mistakes power for eternity. They stared at each other. The wind howled, as if the heavens themselves wanted to witness the reckoning. The gunfire started before the words were done. The ground shook with powder and muffled screams. Serena's men fought back, but Victor advanced without mercy. Damon ran into the main hall and shouted her name. "Serena!" She turned, her hair loose and moving in slow motion. He reached her, gripping her shoulders. "Don't do this alone." She smiled, the same smile from before the war, before the fall. "I was never alone, Damon. I just forgot." The gunfight raged on. Windows shattered, glass raining like knives. Victor entered the hall, gun raised. "Love never wins, Serena. It only distracts." She met his gaze, steady and calm. "Then you've never loved," the shot echoed. A single bullet sliced through the silence. Damon threw himself in front of her without thinking. The impact sent him crashing into her arms. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Serena held him tight, eyes wide with disbelief. "No!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the halls like thunder made of grief. Blood darkened the floor, her perfume mingling with the scent of gunpowder. "Why?" she cried, trembling. Damon's smile was faint, his face pale. "Because I promised you. I wouldn't let love die." The tears came without restraint. Victor watched, emotionless, until Serena lifted her gaze, and what burned in her eyes was something even death had never seen. Fury and faith, bound together. She reached for the gun on the floor, aimed with calm precision, and fired once. The shot was sharp, final. The bullet struck Victor square in the chest. The sound was heavy and clean, the sound of fate closing its own circle. His body fell slowly, as if time itself had bowed to her will. The silence that followed was the sound of the end. Rain began to pour, washing away the blood, erasing the traces, carrying off the ghosts. Serena still held Damon in her arms, his body weak but his eyes steady. "You're going to live, do you hear me?" she said, her voice breaking. He gave a faint smile. "And you're going to love, even if it hurts." His breath faltered. For an instant, the world seemed to dissolve. Serena pulled him closer, and the sound of her grief merged with the storm outside. The hours that followed passed slowly. Dawn came, its pale light cutting through the shattered stained glass. For the first time, the underworld was silent. Victor Hale was dead. And Serena Vorse was alive. but her heart was too wounded to call it a victory. She walked to the makeshift altar in the hall, where blood and flowers met, and placed Damon's ring on the cold marble. "Maybe now I can say yes," she whispered. Her voice sounded like a broken prayer, but on my own terms. The wind swept gently through the room, lifting fallen petals from the floor. Light touched her face, and for a brief moment, Serena looked at peace. The guards watched in silence, unwilling to disturb what felt like something sacred. The woman the world once feared now looked like a weary soul before the love that had outlived death. Serena walked to the doorway, paused, and looked back. Inside, the empty altar reflected everything that had been lost, and everything still waiting to be reborn. "Love is the only war worth losing," she murmured, and then stepped into the rain. It embraced her, washing away the blood, the past, and the promises. And as she disappeared beneath the storm, her own voice echoed inside her mind. Serena Vos, the fallen queen reborn. The woman who proved that even the coldest heart can bleed for love. And that sometimes, a new beginning starts exactly where everything ends. If this story moved you, leave a comment and tell me what you would have done in their place. Subscribe and turn on notifications. There are many more passionate stories waiting to be told.